Today's bite-sized episode is sponsored by AG1, one of the most nutrient-dense whole food supplements that I've come across, and I myself have been drinking it regularly for over 5 years. It contains vitamins, minerals, probiotics, prebiotics, digestive enzymes, and so much more, and can help with energy, focus, gut health, digestion, and support a healthy immune system. If you go to drinkag1.com/live more, they are giving my listeners a very special offer, a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first order. See all details at drinkag1.com/live more. Welcome to Feel Better, Live More Bite Size, your weekly dose of positivity and optimism to get you ready for the weekend. Today's clip is from episode 58 of the podcast with neuroscientist, executive coach, and author of the best-selling book, The Source, Dr. Tara Swart. In this clip, Tara shares some powerful tips and tools to help you create the life that you want to live. What is a vision board and why is it so powerful?
Okay, so I'm going to start off by saying that this year mine is actually on my phone on Pinterest, which is, it's not the ideal that I recommend, but I just couldn't find the images that I wanted in magazines. Visual images, they track to parts of your brain that resonate deeper down. So if you write out a list of what you want in your life, that won't have the same impact. But if you repeatedly see these images of what you want, then when you're going around your daily life, you're more likely to notice opportunities to do or get things that you want in your life. Your ideal vision board is a collage that you make by hand. So it's visual. You've been tactile with it whilst you've created it. So you've already created a bond with it in a way. And I just would get a variety of magazines. So, maybe travel, lifestyle, food, and look for images that represent things that I want in my life that year. Sometimes you see an image and it's not something you thought about that you wanted, but you just really love that image. You can pick images like that. I try not to use words or numbers, but if you specifically had a goal of earning a certain amount of money this year, let's say if you run your own business, you could put that number on there. And it's really important to think about things like, if you don't want your life to be too crammed full, that you actually have a board with some space on it, that you don't fill it up. So the whole look and feel of it should represent how you want your life to be.
So what is it? Is it that by making our brain aware of what we want, like actually having some sort of act full of intention where we're actually stating, whether it's in journaling, whether it's in affirmations, whether it's on the vision board, we're actually visualizing what we want out of life. Mm-hmm. Is it that the brain is more aware to seeing those opportunities?
Yeah, so journaling and affirmations are still words, right? So this is adding in another level, which is the visual one. And the way it works is through 2 main mechanisms in the brain called selective attention or selective filtering and value tagging. So because we're bombarded with so much information all the time, everything that we see, everything that we hear, everything that we feel, our brain naturally has to filter most of that out. And so there's a natural mechanism for understanding what's important to our survival, to us doing well in life. And anything that's not totally relevant to that will get filtered out. By creating a vision board, you're priming your brain, telling it what's important to you, so it's more likely to notice those things. So, if I said to you today, notice everything that's red, you will notice more London buses and post boxes and, telephone boxes than you do normally. And this is a more sophisticated version of doing that. Also, the value tagging is that what the brain does decide to keep as important in front of mind, it then tags in order of importance. So importance in terms of things like our personal identity, our work identity, our feeling of belonging in society, and then things that I need to be successful. So again, if you repeatedly look at these images, they're much more front of mind. They're higher up in your value tagging system. And do you remember, did you play Tetris? So do you remember if you played it till last thing at night, when you were falling asleep and you shut your eyes, you could see the little blocks falling in front of your eyes? So that's a phenomenon that's now called the Tetris effect. So if you keep your vision board by your bed, then in those states of waking and falling asleep, the hypnagogic and hypnopompic states, your brain is more impressionable. So if you see that image last thing at night, you close your eyes, you go to sleep, it is going to make a stronger impression on your subconscious. And then the next day, you're much more likely to actually act on that if there's a trigger that reminds you to do it at the time.
Yeah. The other thing that really fascinates me, and I read about the Tetris effect in your book, and you've talked about all the science, which is really, really fascinating, is that period just before we go to bed. Yes, you can do it with the vision boards, but if we look at what a lot of people in society are doing, they're on their phones in the evening, they're scrolling through the news, let's say. If we're looking at that just before we go to bed, as opposed to these beautiful images of how we want our life to be, that's going to have quite a different impact on our subconscious, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's, one of the things about being conscious and not being on autopilot is basically controlling what you expose your brain to. Because the more you expose it to bad news, the more you're likely to live life through fear. We know, for example, that people who repeatedly looked at images of the Twin Towers going down, who had no personal connection to New York, could get PTSD. I mean, it's incredible that just exposing yourself repeatedly to bad news, especially with visual imagery, can actually traumatize you in a way that, you can't easily get over. So I'm very, very careful about what I look at, what I read. My social media feeds are carefully controlled to be as positive as possible. You're absolutely right that if you don't think about it and you look at bad news just before you go to sleep, then you think about young children, even if they, read a book that's not that scary, but maybe has some monsters in it, then they can have nightmares, they can feel frightened. So yeah, everything that we expose our brain to has an impact, and we need to be much more mindful of that, especially because the gearing of the brain, it's 2 to 2.5 times more likely to focus on negatives than positives. So we need to be feeding our brain more positive things to keep ourselves confident and, moving forward positively.
I think what you're saying is so profound, because it's the missing piece for me in health and well-being. It's, yes, the physical stuff's important, moving more, sleeping more. Of course, these things are important, but what we're exposing our brains to is something that I don't think gets spoken about enough. And I think it's super, super important. So you mentioned something, and I think you talk about this in the book around the section on vision boards, about why images are so powerful. They bypass something in the brain. Is that right?
Well, I think we're very visual creatures. So, vision is a primary sense for most people. And we're bombarded with images that we don't necessarily curate. So that's an important part, a segue from what we were just saying. But yeah, visual sort of, tracks more strongly to the subconscious than when you read something. It sort of travels around the brain in a way that gets picked up by logic, by emotion, by intuition. Whereas this kind of bypasses the logic and just gets straight to the core of us. It resonates with us. So using images to make your life feel more positive is really important.
So if that's the case, if images are so powerful, is that one of the reasons then why Instagram has been so successful, because it is image-based? But also, is that one of the reasons why Instagram can be, in many ways, uniquely toxic?
Yeah, so I think you're right. The image, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, the images can be so impactful, but in a positive or a negative way. And that's what we need to be aware of. So yeah, I think the issues with comparison, with discontentment, with resentment, they are magnified by imagery rather than writing. I sort of focus on wanting things that I can make possible. And that's really the key difference between vision boards as they've been described before and what I talk about is I actually call it an action board. Because what I say is you can't just make this collage and then sit at home waiting for checks to come in the post. You need to be doing things every day to try to make your dreams come true. And so, spending some time on social media is great, it's fun, but spending too much time on it could actually be taking you away from doing the things that you can do to make your life the life that you really want, rather than looking at other people's lives.
I love it that you call it an action board, because you're saying create that, but use it as a way to imprint what you want in your brain and then create action.
Absolutely. I think that there's been a bit of an unfair, bad reputation of things like the law of attraction and vision boards. with this idea that you just expect it to come true. I don't think that's what it ever was either, but I've made a much more strong case for saying that you need to do the things that make it come true.
And I think that's what makes your book so unique. You have brought some of these ideas that have been there before to life, but you've got some scientific grounding in them now. And, I guess one of your core concepts is, how do we create the life that we want rather than let life sort of happen to us?
Let's say you and I want to go on a journey. Would you rather be sitting in the passenger seat and I choose where we go and the route that we take, or would you rather be driving and choosing the destination? It's kind of like that in life. It's very easy to go through the motions every day and let life happen to you. But if you think about it, if we stop and step back, we have a lot more choice in what we tolerate, in what happens to us, in the choices that we make than we necessarily think. 'Cause it's easy to just sort of go on autopilot.
And I think that's something that really does happen these days, doesn't it? Many people are living life on a treadmill, day to day, week to week, before you know another year's gone by. And I think one of the issues is that people don't have time. They don't feel that they can actually separate off some time where they reflect internally. You talk about how many of us actually use fear as a way of making decisions. And that can be problematic. Can you explain what you mean by that?
That's actually a natural default. So you have to make a lot of effort to override that, because to help us to survive, fear is actually our strongest emotion.
So we're hardwired for that.
Yeah. And you can see why, because when we lived in the cave, you had to be afraid of saber-toothed tigers and run away from them, otherwise you die. So basically these sort of negative emotions like fear, anger, disgust, shame, and sadness, they have a much more powerful effect on our brain than positive emotions like love and trust and joy and excitement. And there's a survival advantage to that. But once you know that, you've raised it in your awareness, you can take steps to say, I choose to make my decisions from abundance, which is a phrase that I use a lot in the book. So, of course, we don't want bad things to happen to us. We don't want to lose our jobs. We don't want to, end our relationships. We don't want to lose friends. We don't want to be in debt. Everybody will be saying, yes, of course, I don't want those things. But instead of making your life decisions based on avoiding those bad things, just choose to make your life decisions based on things like, building up a little nest egg in the bank, having your relationship evolve and improve more than, it even is at the moment, making new friends. So those things all seem to involve a bit of risk, but you can make a real effort to understand the psyche of your partner more and improve your relationship. You can try to go out and meet new and different people that will broaden your horizons. And actually meeting new people, having new experiences, reading books on topics that are really different to what you normally do, they're all activities that make your brain more open and flexible. And once you learn to try new things and you get a positive benefit from that, then if something bad happens, you will just feel that little bit more able to deal with a change because you've been willingly bringing changes into your life, which seems like a risk at times, but is actually a really good thing to do.
So I guess in many ways, the inspiring take home for me is that, look, we are programmed to look at the negative. So we absolutely, if we want to get the most out of our life, we need a strategy. If we leave it up to the default, if we leave it up to, if I feel like it, I'll do it, it ain't going to happen because we're hardwired to think this way. So, many people are starting to realize this. That's why I think so many people in the health and well-being sector are talking about gratitude now, because yes, there's science behind gratitude, but it's great to have so many people talking about it and saying, hey, it's okay to say that I'm grateful for things and have a daily practice. What are the things that you think you have changed in your life that have had the most impact on your well-being?
Great question. I try to do the right things about sleep and everything else, but I don't get stressed about it if I can't.
Yeah.
So that's a really big thing for me. I try to eat right. I try to remember to take my supplements. I journal when I can. I meditate when I can. But if I don't do it, then I don't get stressed. I would say that is a really big learning for me. Yeah. I think that's a really big tip. I would also say it's better to change 10 things by 1% than try to change one thing by 10%. So work on micro tweaks to your routine, like go to bed half an hour earlier, do a digital detox over one weekend, drink a bit more water than you normally do. Try to increase your steps by 1,000 to 2,000 per day for a week and see what happens. So for small things like that, build up because you start to feel better. Your brain becomes more powerful, and then you're able to do, some of the bigger goals that you may have been saving up.
Hope you enjoyed that bite-sized clip. Do spread the love by sharing this episode with your friends and family. And if you want more, why not go back and listen to the original full conversation with my guest? If you enjoyed this episode, I think you will really enjoy my bite-sized Friday email. It's called the Friday 5, and each week I share things that I do not share on social media. It contains 5 short doses of positivity, articles or books that I'm reading, quotes that I'm thinking about, exciting research I've come across, and so much more. I really think you're going to love it. The goal is for it to be a small yet powerful dose of feel good to get you ready for the weekend. You can sign up for it free of charge at drchatterjee.com/Friday5. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Make sure you have pressed subscribe, and I'll be back next week with my long-form conversation on Wednesday and the latest episode of Bite Size next Friday.